Time is running out before the trade deadline. General managers are burning up the phones. Dregs, the Leafs are heading west for a 3-game road trip. As they do that, Brad Treleving is going to be a busy guy. What's he up to? What's his primary target?
Well, he's still focused on adding a centerman. The question is, who is that centerman and what is the best available fit, Gino? And the reality is, when you look around the trade market, the market hasn't been officially set yet because of the playoff battles that exist in both the East and the West. So sure, the perfect scenario would be, Doug Armstrong, the St. Louis Blues, wakes up between now and Friday and says, yeah, we're in a playoff hunt, but you know what? We're going to trade our captain. That is extraordinarily unlikely unless somebody absolutely blows Armstrong's doors off. And hey, Toronto is willing to pay more than fair market value for Brayden Schenn. It just doesn't seem likely, and that might be a stretch. So then you look beyond that. You look at Scott Laughton of the Philadelphia Flyers. Many close to Laughton believe that he would love to suit up for the Toronto Maple Leafs if there's a trade that makes sense. What's going on with former Leafs GM Lou Lamoriello and Brock Nelson? I mean, Lou would like to keep Brock Nelson. That seems unlikely. So a trade is possible, if not more, of what is expected from the New York Islanders. Could Toronto be in there? The drop-off between Brayden Schenn and the rest of the field is, I think, why the Maple Leafs are struggling to identify the best fit at center ice. And maybe at the end of the week, they just kind of rein in and say, hey, let's just start filling holes incrementally. And oh, by the way, Gino, there is a salary cap, and the Toronto Maple Leafs are right at it. So for the Maple Leafs to make any moves, it's not just about spending the assets, but the money, of course, has to work.
Look, this is already a really confusing time of year, but you throw injuries into the mix, and then it gets really confusing. Jack Hughes got tangled up, crashed to the boards on Sunday, looked really bad. What's the latest on him, Dregs, and how do you see this affecting what the Devils do between now and the deadline?
Well, we're probably going to learn later this afternoon the full extent of the injury to Jack Hughes, and if it's as serious as some believe it is. I mean, that's a huge blow, obviously, to the New Jersey Devils in their quest to be that contending team in the Eastern Conference. I mean, you don't replace a player like Jack Hughes, and again, we have to just sit tight here until we get the official word later today. But we also know that Tom Fitzgerald, the GM of the New Jersey Devils, is an aggressive guy. He is. And prior to this injury, again, status unknown on Jack Hughes, he was willing to, again, get aggressive in different areas. So if Hughes is out long term, then maybe this pushes Fitzgerald and the New Jersey Devils to do something more significant, especially in his want up front. But it's a tough market to get into right now. We just talked about the Toronto Maple Leafs. There'll be other teams that we discuss here that are looking for centers and other pieces up front. So if New Jersey has to get in that game because of injury this late in the process, it's going to be a challenge.
You talk about other teams looking for help at center. The Vancouver Canucks fit into that category. What specifically do you think they're hoping to add? And then also, what's the latest on Brock Boeser?
Yeah. Well, shocking, Vancouver wants to add a center. Now, the specifics of the center that the Vancouver Canucks would like to add is a player who can skate. He's got some speed. That element, part of the criteria of what the Vancouver Canucks are looking for, is a big part of the search for Patrick Allvin and Jimmy Rutherford. So you look at some of the available pieces, and we've already talked about a couple of them. Scott Laughton with the Philadelphia Flyers. What about Brock Nelson? Again, criteria for the Canucks is they need to inject speed. So that has to be part of the transaction. But then they have to balance that with a distinct need. They need a 1 or a 2 center, and that's always hard to acquire in season. What would be great is if Elias Pettersson started to play like a top-line center for Vancouver, then that would take some of the pressure off. But they're definitely looking for help up the middle of the ice, and if they can add a depth defenseman, then that's what they'll do as well. And as far as Brock Boeser is concerned, this one is curious, right? So there was an offer made to extend Brock Boeser, Gino, in the first half of the regular season. A good offer is how it was described by me. That offer, I don't believe, is on the table anymore. And I don't think that Brock Boeser's camp, unless there's a sudden change of heart, really wants to further engage with negotiations. So what does Alvin do? I mean, there's a strong market for Brock Boeser. There really is, as a secondary scoring, his experience and all of that. But Vancouver is also trying to nail down a playoff spot. And if they can do that, obviously they want to go as deep as they can. And Boeser could be a big part of that as well. So I think there's exploration into what the return would be for Brock Boeser and the Canucks.
Obviously, when you're a team like the Vancouver Canucks, there is some serious tweaking to be done. I get that. But what about the top of the league? The Jets are the best team in the entire NHL. Should they be messing with chemistry? How aggressive do you expect Kevin Cheveldayoff to be between now and the deadline? And are they one of the teams in the hunt for Brock Nelson?
Well, could be, yes. And that would qualify, I think, Gino, as big game hunting. And there is a bit of a risk there in tinkering with that chemistry, as you've described, because this group is a terrific group in Winnipeg. And they've accomplished so much to this point of the season. But they're also reminded of their lack of playoff success, especially last year. And they were embarrassed by that. So that's galvanized this group. So I think that there is some level of sensitivity to that and seeing how far this group can run. But when you've got a player like Brock Nelson available, or any of the top centers, I mean, you have to at least inquire. But what is a challenge on an annual basis, frankly, Gino, for Kevin Cheveldayoff, is trying to figure out what the market is. That's step one. And then step two, who among the players that Winnipeg might have interest in is also willing to waive their trade protection to join the Winnipeg Jets. And that sounds absurd, doesn't it? When you look at a team that's in top spot in the National Hockey League. I think Brock Nelson would be willing to go to Winnipeg, but there'll be a lot of suitors for Nelson when Lou Lamoriello decides to officially put him in play, and that's got to be around the corner.
Man, there's a lot going on right now. And as you mentioned, Dregs, we're hoping to get an update on the condition of Jack Hughes a little later in the afternoon. And then Dregs, Pierre, and CJ are going to be back for the full version of Insider Trading. That's coming up on the early edition of SportsCenter.